All right, I am super excited today. Today is Halloween, and the guest I have on today is someone who I actually kind of ran into doing some market research on TikTok and in the world of coaching and in the world of personal growth and development. And it is my absolute privilege and pleasure to welcome Tim Arrigo, who is a seasoned 10 plus year men's breakthrough coach, founder of the Total Breakthrough Academy, and specializes in assisting married men to break through self-destruction and reignite their marriages. So, Tim, welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Man, thank you, brother. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. So, like I said, I ran into your videos on TikTok. And for most people who don't know you on this podcast, kind of take us through the former days where you were, as you said, living in Hollywood with roaches crawling all around to the you of today, and just kind of the
Yeah.
2-minute snapshot of that.
Yeah. So in a nutshell, I early in my life went through some early adversity in my life, and I responded to that adversity through patterns of self destruction, and got addicted to narcotics. This was during like the OxyContin epidemic. I had a knee surgery from skimboarding and skateboarding. Got the surgery and was like the poster child for OxyContin, man. Like I got addicted to OxyContin, was doctor shopping, selling them. And then, like anybody else, you get addicted to those for long enough, heroin becomes a cheaper option. So I moved over to heroin, and yeah, my life just took a drastic turn from there. And I ended up addicted to heroin and Xanax, overdoses, psych units, and ended up getting hepatitis C. And with the hepatitis C, I got put on interferon. And through the interferon treatment, it's very similar to chemotherapy. And the interferon treatment was, it really, really broke me, man. Really, it really forced me to take a long, hard look at my life. I had just watched one of my best friends die from cirrhosis of the liver. He died from liver failure about a year earlier from hepatitis C. And then I get diagnosed, and I'm only 27, and I got diagnosed with 27 because of my IV usage. And so I just really it was kind of like I had this moment of cognitive dissonance where it was like, I'm doing this interferon, but I'm still using these narcotics that gave me the hepatitis C that made me have to do this interferon. And so I just realized how absolutely backwards my life was. And so I just decided to make a change. And the hospital wouldn't detox me. They wouldn't take me because of the interferon and the methadone. So I just decided to do a grassroots detox at my house. And I got some medications from a doctor out in Riverside and did a grassroots detox at my house. And it was by far the most painful and arduous process I have ever gone through in my entire life. And through that detox was just my whole entire being just got wrung out like a wet rag, and gave my life to God in the middle of that detox. And I said, God, you can have my life. In my boxers, dude, hit my knees on the ground, put my hands up, put my face down on the ground. I said, God, I throw in the towel on my life. If you're really real, I said, you can have my life and you can do whatever you want with it. And man, after that, I came out of that experience and was just really shocked that I actually had done it. And my whole life just took on a different, it was like, I felt like I just was living my whole life inside of a room with, the shutters closed, and then I opened up the blinds for the first time and saw the light, and I saw trees, and I saw people smiling, and so I just felt like my whole life was just it was like I was high all over again, but I was high on life, and I just I got addicted to helping other people. I got addicted to wanting to see the lights turn on in others and wanting to show other people really like, hey man, what was really holding them back, so. And ever since then, that was 2012. So ever since then until now, here I am, and it's been an amazing journey, and it's been exciting, it's been fulfilling, it's been really hard at times, but it's been so rewarding because when you're working with people and you're working with them on those very deep, intimate issues, it's just beautiful, man. It's very fulfilling.
Absolutely. Your story, that, I mean, that's so visceral. And I know this is landing for so many people, but at different levels because we all have different phases of relatability with surrender, right? And like what I'm hearing from you is here was my path to get to that never again moment, right? That whole character change, that moment of surrender. And I'm with you too. I tore my disc skateboarding under I-95 in Philly. And I will say that narcotics and Xanax and all that shit to be able to sleep with the pain. And it became a backwards, upside down, up the down staircase kind of a cycle to the point of desperation of like, this is not, I just can't do this anymore. So I absolutely relate to that one 3000%. So I thank you for sharing that part of your story and being. I want to acknowledge you and I want to affirm you a second for being open and vulnerable and transparent and sharing your story in the way that you do because I know it's going to help so many people. And I love how that kind of launched you into coming from a changing the life to like how can I serve? How can I serve? And so, what kinds of mental health facilities have you worked in that kind of prepared you for coaching and kind of got you excited and like, making that transition?
I think in the very beginning, I was so passionate that I lived in Costa Mesa, California, which is like considered to be like rehab Riviera. That's what they call it. So you could throw a rock. I literally, there was a place across the street from my house that like most of the neighbors didn't even know about. There's so many facilities in the area. So I started working for a place called Northbound early on. I got a job as a graveyard shift. Um, and I started working at a place called Solid Landings, and I moved up from in Solid Landings from like a swing shift to the day shift to the lead shift tech, and then I moved to program manager, and then program director, and then I was always just so passionate, and I always took a client centered approach.
Mhm.
So I think that in the world of mental health, when there's a lot of clients, everything has to be streamlined, processes have to be dialed. And a lot of times clients get caught up in that, in the cookie cutter approach, whether it's with their medications or whether it's with their treatment plan or whatever it is. So I always kind of tried to take a more client centered approach and meet the client where they're at. I was really well known for my unique interventions that I would do with clients. Like
Yeah.
I would oftentimes, when you're in the clinical setting, clients are wanting to leave the clinical setting. It's what's called against clinical advice, what's called ACA and AMA, right? So I was always kind of thinking on my feet. There was times where I would take guys from a facility. They wanted to leave, and I'd go, "Okay, you want to go? Okay, it's okay. We'll let you go. We're gonna go, but before you go, let's go get some food." And I'd take them in and out, get them some food. If they smoked, I'd buy them a pack of smokes, let them smoke, and then I'd take them to the mall, and they'd be like, "What are we doing here?" Like, just walk around with me, and I'd walk around with them at the mall. And I'd spray some, cologne. And hey, what do you think of this Sauvage? Yeah, you like this? Okay, cool. And then I'd take them upstairs to Macy's in the suit department. I'd say, hey, what size are you? And I'd get them into I'm a 38 regular. Okay. So I'd put them in a suit, put a tie on them, put some shoes on them. And then I'd go, hey, how do you like? And they're looking at themselves in the mirror. And I'd say, hey, how do you feel right now? And then I'd say, hey, does a guy like this make decisions like that?
Mm-hmm.
And they'd be looking at themselves in the mirror and they'd be like, oh, man.
Pattern interrupt.
Yeah. Like a total identity shift. Right? And then they'd put back their sweatpants on and like their sweatshirt on, and they'd be like, dude, I want to be in that suit again. And I'm like, right, right. And so that was one of the interventions I used to do. And then I worked for a couple other facilities. I branched out doing consulting on my own with my own company. And then I started a virtual program where we were during COVID working with telehealth. Um, and um, and then I got kind of, I kind of got a sour taste in my mouth with the way that um, just specifically like that industry can be sometimes. I think at times people experience compassion fatigue, and I just was very frustrated that sometimes, it comes down to the bottom line, and people are very concerned about the bottom line. And with insurance kind of tightening the ropes and kind of tightening things up, it can be hard for facilities to sometimes, make a profit. And it's, I understand that as a business, but at the same time, there's a balance between client care and profit, and so um, that kind of motivated me to, I was already kind of doing my own thing. So it motivated me to just completely branch out and just move into the, my own private coaching business.
I love it. That's great. So, and I'm going to actually adjust this light because I think it might be coming in too hard here. But one thing that stands out to me is that when we work with that many people and we see that many people coming in and out, and we see we work with so many people who need to create change. We see large numbers of people, work with people who just are in a place where they have to create, they desire to create, they're required to create change, and there's these patterns that come up. And you've worked with, I think, over 2,000 men, correct?
Yeah.
Okay,
Probably more than that. Probably. I say that number, but probably more.
got it. So in the 2,000 plus men that you've worked with, in changing their patterns, what main pattern stands out to you the most that requires changing? Well, I guess from a macro, of course, there's many small ones, but
I'd say a lot of times what guys don't realize is that they are sending themselves unconsciously a message every day through their behavior. And it's almost like a lot of times it's a trauma rehearsal. It's like, they were neglected, so they neglect themselves. They were abandoned, so they abandon themselves. They were abused, so they abuse themselves. And they are, a part of them believes that's what they deserve. And so they perpetrate it onto themselves unknowingly. And so I've recognized over the years that really I don't, after a while, I just started to see pathology. I didn't see like specific problems. I just kind of saw a trail that always led to the same places, whether it was attachment wounds, whether it was some type of adversity or ACE, adverse childhood experience that impacted them earlier in their life. Whether it was even times that maybe they were entitled and they were given a silver spoon, or whatever it was in their life, maybe good things should have happened but didn't happen, or maybe there were just specific relational dynamics in their family of origin, like maybe their brother or sister had mental illness and needed more attention, and so they got neglected. But there's always usually a pattern of experiences, and if you follow the trail back, it always leads to the same place. So I think the biggest pattern was for a lot of people just not knowing their personal story.
mm,
Like, and I think for me, like, I didn't know my personal story. Like, I didn't know how stuff affected me. Like, I just thought, yeah, like it was what it was, and you move on with life. But you don't realize how those experiences really shape you. And I think it's important. I think a lot of people, especially men, they think like, oh, if I talk about my childhood, I'm being weak and I'm being a victim and
right,
I'm blaming my parents. It's like, no, bro, we're not blaming anybody. It's called cause and effect. It's like if you get a pit bull from the shelter and that dog exhibited some behavioral issues as an adult, and the dog was skittish, or the dog was snappy and the dog had aggression issues, then you would just, and somebody said, hey, went to go pet your dog and the dog lashed out, and somebody said, hey, what's up with your dog? You would just have to say, hey, the dog's a rescue. Right. And without knowing anything about the dog's history, people would automatically attribute the way the dog acts to experiences that shaped that dog's behavior. So I just say to people, behavior never lies. Right. Like your behavior says everything about how you think and feel about yourself
right.
and about what you believe that you deserve. And a lot of that you're not even conscious of because you don't think about it like that. It's just what you do and it's who you are. And it's this identity that you have, this self concept, this schema that you are just completely bought into.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting too, because when, there's there's a therapist and there's a coach, right? And kind of, I don't want to say blurring the lines of what works where and what doesn't work. But what comes up for me, I was about to ask you about neuroscience and acting ourselves, behaving ourselves into a new identity, right? But before we can do that, or before we can coach anybody to do that, it's really about you as a coach, like being trauma informed. And so give me a snapshot of where you draw the line. How deep into, or what types of processes do you go into as a trauma informed coach to be able to assist them to identify those things, unpack those things, let it out, so that we can rebuild and act into a new deserving, you know?
I think the trauma, like, trauma is like a buzzword, almost like narcissism is nowadays. And I think as more people are becoming aware of it, I think that more people want to talk about it. There's a lot of people, and experts in the field that, they really hyper focus down and niche down on the trauma. And that's never really been my approach. I think that it's important to integrate those experiences, but I'm more about like, what are the actionable steps that I need to take every day?
Yeah.
And I think that you can get lost in theory, so my approach has always been like excavation, right? I talk about it like it's archaeology. Excavation, man. When an archaeologist shows up on the site, they don't just take a backhoe into the ground. They flag off an area, they determine where they want to dig, and they begin to dig in that area. And they sift away dust and debris, and they uncover, they use little, tools and little shovels and, blow away dust. And they uncover artifacts and antiquities, relics from the past that were always there. And then they study those things and they understand, how do those things relate to today?
Yeah.
Right? And what is the relationship there? And then they put those things on display for other people to learn from. So my approach has always been, I think a lot of people, it's my trauma, it's my trauma. And they're staying that 5, 6, 7, 8 years later. And it's like, okay, look, like, is it your trauma or is it your mindset? Right? Is it your trauma or is it the fact that you
Yeah.
now have used this trauma as a crutch? And I'm not in any way invalidating what somebody has been through, but there's a point in time where you need to move beyond that, and you need to start to, okay, it happened, it's over. I need to understand, how has this affected me? How does it affect the way I talk to myself? And it's like, a lot of people don't realize that sitting back and continuing to use your trauma as the scapegoat for why you're not taking the action steps today that
Yep.
you should be taking, in and of itself is a trauma response.
Yeah.
So I just think, for me, I think that's really what separates coaches from therapists. I think that therapists, because they're bound by ethics, they can't a lot of times take a more directive approach. And I always try to stay within my scope of practice.
For sure.
And, like, I have experienced a wide array of, and been exposed to people in many different types of traumatic experiences that they've encountered. Pretty much, I think at this point, pretty much every kind, except for maybe extremely unique situations. But
Sure.
I think I think it all goes back to the same place, and I think degrees of suffering may differ, but I think that the approach always has to be awareness, integration, and then what are the skills, and, like, again, like, yeah, I need to uncover these things and dig them up and understand, how are these things operating in my life without my permission.
Yeah.
And I always tell guys, you can't defeat what you can't define. You can't conquer what you don't confront.
Right.
And you need to first get vulnerable. You need to get open. You need to go to those places and not stay there, but understand it, integrate it, become aware of it, meet yourself there in that place.
You've said so much. So there's so many golden boulders, but you can't define, or you can't defeat what you can't define. And I think, just going back to what you said, I kind of approach it the same way, where here's the awareness of the trauma. Like, yes, it's not invalidated, it's valid, so long as there's an awareness. But if we sit too long, I even used to hear Abraham Hicks talk about this, where some people would go through therapy and all they would focus on is the past, and they would activate that vibration more and only attract from that place, versus, okay, here's the contrast, the shit I went through. Then maybe in there, I like to do a radical forgiveness process, which can take a long time depending on who and the situation, the context. Sending radical forgiveness to that. Okay, now to what you said, let's go. Let's, awareness. And I have an acronym SPY: study, practice, assimilate, integrate, embody. But it starts with the awareness step, like what you said. So I love that. So what do you feel like, what has to occur for somebody to have that never again moment? Like for them to viscerally feel the values of the new character they wish to embody and just really have that moment.
I personally believe that a rock bottom moment has to occur in somebody's life. I personally believe that somebody has to go through enough suffering to, it's like the suffering has to be, it has to outweigh everything else in their life. And it has to take them to a place of desperation, sacrifice, willingness, open mindedness. They
Mm-hmm.
have to be malleable to what comes next,
Yeah.
and I think for me personally, I really do believe that there has to be a pivotal moment. We can call it a rock bottom moment, and it looks different for everybody. Sometimes it's physical for some people, sometimes it's a spiritual bottom, sometimes it's more mental, sometimes it's their family or wife left them. But there has to be that moment, I think, in somebody's life when they realize, okay, I have to change, and I am ready. I am willing. I am able. I am capable, and I am determined from this point to not continue staying where I'm at or going back to where I was, and I'm ready. And I think that again, belief and desire have to be there. So you have to have the belief and you have to have the desire.
100%. So switching gears from that, what would you say to someone you're coaching who's experiencing fear and anxiety around doing something for the first time? And this might be a piece that's a little bit more relatable to a lot of people who are listening to, I have a lot of people who are starting their own businesses, or they have a side business, or they have a full-time business as an entrepreneur, and, they have a family, new coaches, seasoned coaches. So all those people are listening. So yeah, what would you say to someone who's experiencing that fear and anxiety about doing something for the first time and getting over that hump?
I would say get really used to it. I would say fail often. I would say fail forward. I would say get really, really familiar with failure and just try to detach yourself from it being as a failure. It's not really failure until you stop trying, and a lot of people don't want to fail, so they don't try. And a fear of failure doesn't prevent you from failing, it prevents you from trying, and not trying creates failure. So a fear of failure creates failure. So I think a lot of people just need to embrace that fear, embrace that anxiety, know that it's normal, stop trying to avoid the emotion or wait till you're comfortable to try it. It's something new. So fear is always going to be involved. So my recommendation would be embrace the fear and stop assuming that the fear is abnormal or something you need to get rid of. And
Right.
just embrace that fear, see it as a great thing, and it's a great opportunity to practice courage and learning how to overcome fear and be brave, right? And when we do those things, we get a result. And what's the result? A sense of accomplishment, right? And if it was easy, it wouldn't be worth it, right? It wouldn't have the value or the impact in your life that it could if you were to really push forward and really go for something that you believe is worth it. Is it worth it for you? Everything requires a risk that's worth it, and my life has just been it's like a roll of the dice every time. And I just think about, what if I do improve in this? What if I do get
Right.
better in this? And I think that that's a really exciting way to live life, is in that state of like, hey, like we were talking about the cold plunge before we started. What if I can do 4 minutes? Wow, what if? Like, what if I
Yeah,
could do 5 minutes?
totally. And I was
You
just
know?
about to ask you, how is it possible to get started before we think we're ready? But I think you just kind of answered
Yeah, I think getting started is um, it's knowing that that's going to feel normal. I'm going to feel fear. There's going to be anxiety, right? And that's okay,
that.
right?
Just
And
okay.
that's
Yeah.
okay. And don't try to control the emotion. Don't try to push it down. Don't assume that it's bad, right? Embrace what you're feeling and understand that just because it feels quote unquote bad doesn't mean it's bad for you,
Right.
right? Just like something that feels good doesn't automatically mean it's good for you, right? We should know that by now.
Right. Absolutely. Have you ever had to overcome procrastination, and in what area?
Oh yeah. Oh, a lot of procrastination. Yeah, my mind has a tendency to wander, whether it be with OCD or ADD, right? And my mind can easily get distracted. And I think for me personally, procrastination, what I've learned about procrastination is procrastination really shows up when instant gratification isn't an option for me. Like when
Say that again.
procrastination shows up when instant gratification is not an option for me, right? So it's like when grit, when perseverance, when determination, when resilience are required, right? That's typically it's you're gonna either lean in or you're gonna procrastinate. And um, procrastination is an avoidance tactic. It's a form of fleeing, fight or flight. It's a form of flight, or freeze, right? Instead of choosing to approach problems or attack them, I'm avoiding them.
Right.
So I think it's a dissociative mechanism that people use to avoid discomfort. And I
Totally.
think that procrastination is also a form of self sabotage. And it can be very dangerous if you continue to procrastinate and put off work that you need to do today for tomorrow, because inevitably you're only creating more of the problem and creating more stress. So for me personally, I've procrastinated things in my life, and at this point in my life, I'm the type of person where, like, if I see mail and I see like a bill that needs to get paid or something, I do it right away, because I can't stand having something like looming that
100%.
I have to take care of. It
100%.
haunts me. Like in my mind, I cannot stop thinking about it. Like there was $20. I left $20 in my pants, and I was down at the chiropractor and I was like, oh, that $20 is in my pants. And I'm like, oh, it's gonna go in the washer. I'm like, you better remember that when you get home. You better remember that when you get home. Like my mind nowadays, like with the way my mind is, it's very hard for me to procrastinate things without them. And I think as I've become more honest with myself
Mhm.
and I negotiate with myself less, and I meet myself with compassion, but I am stern with myself, a stern compassion. I've also developed a much better relationship with myself where I'm able to be more honest with myself about, hey, hey, dude, you're procrastinating this,
For sure.
and let's be honest about it and let's move forward. So, um, I used to be really hard on myself, and I used to be self-critical, and I used to be doubtful, and I used to be just really hard on myself and not even realize that I was doing it. And um,
Yeah. It
yeah,
gets embedded in us. I love what you're saying right now, because not only can I said so much, like the procrastination, and the longer you let it go, the more stress it builds. It can become a neurology. It can become our modus operandi. It's like what we go to. And I've been there actually. And it's a dangerous place to be, because the longer it goes, like you said, stress builds up. And if you take it far enough, I mean, not only regret, but autoimmune dis-ease in the body, like all sorts of things can manifest from it. But
yeah,
no, uh, I totally resonate with that, and that whole piece about that awareness and that practice of that witness consciousness. That, in cognitive behavioral science we call it metacognition. In the East, for the last 10,000 years, they've called it witness consciousness. That ability to awareness, to see ourselves going, hey, dude, okay, I see you procrastinating with it. It's okay to have that emotion. Like it's okay. It's perceived pain, right? Avoidance, whatever. It's your left brain, and it's like that practice of getting through it. And everybody procrastinates in isolated areas, and it gets to be okay, you know. So I think that's a big piece. Um, Quick little shift. So I have a lot of coaches from all different niches in my feed, a lot of friends who are coaches. And I had a quick question that I jotted down. What could you impart to other coaches from your personal experience in facilitating an exceptional group experience for all participants?
Yeah, that's a great question.
While still making sure that everybody gets taken care of, you know?
That's a great question, and I've had a lot of experience. I worked for a facility, a men's mental health facility called Treehouse Recovery in Costa Mesa, and with all the years that I've had of doing group facilitation, I've facilitated a lot of groups, and it takes a lot of experience. And what I can say is what I would recommend. And there's a couple things. Number one is um, know how to read the energy in the room. Like a lot of times you want to prepare beforehand, but like you'll show up to the call and you got to sometimes feel the energy. Like, you got to be intuitive. Like, is it a time for some curriculum or is it a time for some more process stuff? Is it a time to like throw down some motivation? Is it a time to come with a more like self-reflective, introspective group? Like, and I think you got to really read your intuition. Number two is you got to kind of have computer screens going off in your mind as you're facilitating the group. So you kind of got to be also observing and analyzing the engagement, and what the kind of what your format is doing to the room. Also, you got to keep it entertaining. Like if a coach is doing something virtually, I recommend sharing screen often. I recommend switching screens. I recommend prompting clients. I recommend getting the chat going. I recommend spotlighting people on Zoom. I recommend going back and forth, spotlight two people, then unspotlight them. Like, try to keep it as interactive and engaging as you possibly can and have a format that you do to do that. It becomes really, really redundant for people when it's just somebody talking and kind of just monotone and they're not prompting people. So do that. Also, I think a lot of people may be a little bit more intimidated to maybe isolate one person and focus on their issues, but a lot of times it can be very uh, informative for other people who are attending, and they can learn a lot from that person's experience. So don't be afraid to um, I don't want to say use some as an example, but use someone's experience within the group format to facilitate a process where maybe you can highlight the usage of these techniques you're teaching with this person that's struggling with something, and maybe you can walk them through a technique you teach in your program actively inside the group, and you can show it in real time with an activating event they're going through.
Totally. Yeah.
So I think those are some takeaways for sure. Also, remember that you know your preparation. Like I would recommend, like don't show up 30 minutes before and just kind of, what am I going to do? Like try to kind of throughout the week, like as you go into these groups, even in the morning, like what am I going to go into today? And I'm at the gym and I'm kind of thinking about like, hey, what do the clients need right now? Like what am I going to come in with tonight? Like maybe I'm going to come in with this or that. And I think as you learn and grow through your own process, I think it's just really important to remember that your energy, it's a dopamine exchange, right? So like your energy and the way that you're transmitting energy in that group is a transference of, you're playing on neurochemistry in the group. And
Now,
so it's important to remember that. And I think that as long as we stay aware of that, you can toss in a little YouTube video and do a screen share. You can toss in some curriculum. You can prompt them with an open-ended question. You can, if somebody's disengaged, call on that person, right? Get them engaged, right? Can anybody else relate, right? Raise your hand. Let's get in the chat. You have a question, right? Type yes here. I think all that is an important part of um, and using your personal story, I think, in relatability on that level, which therapists, for years I could never do that. That's the difference here with a coach. Therapists are not allowed to they're not allowed to divulge personal information, right?
right,
They're only allowed to do it if it's um, beneficial and therapeutic for the client. Whereas coaches, like we're allowed to just tell our own personal story as deeply as we want, and people can learn from it. So definitely, like use your story and don't be afraid to be vulnerable and don't be afraid to show fallibility and don't be
yeah.
afraid to show those parts of you.
I love what you're saying too, because I think that's the piece that coaches can learn from therapists is being an active listener. You're speaking to me, and it's like, so what I'm hearing you saying is repeating back to them what they said and making sure that showing them you're an active. But the other piece to what you said, sharing your own story, is huge. And everybody learn. It's so interesting in group dynamics because everybody learns in a different way. We
Yeah.
have different type of brains. We have different type of experiences, and accelerated whole brain learning looks very different for all sorts of different humans. Uh, so okay, we're at 35. So I'm gonna transition into something else. So a little game called Fact or Fiction, and tell us why. You ready?
All right.
All right. As men, we can only attract the type of partner we desire when we embody those characteristics and values first. Fact or fiction?
I would say fact. I would say fact because you don't attract what you want, you attract who you are. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times, they say opposites attract, but that doesn't, I don't believe in that unless it's like magnets. Right. So like attracts like.
It's a
Yeah.
different content. Yeah.
Yeah, if you meet somebody, what are you going to like about them? The fact that you guys have common similarities, what are those similarities? Beliefs, ideas about life, theological standpoints, philosophical standpoints, spiritual standpoints. So you guys are going to have things in common. And what are those commonalities? Well, hopefully they're the traits that you yourself, you know, you where you want to be so that you are attracting and, you know, being attracted by somebody that you would see yourself with because they embody those qualities. So I would say fact.
Got it. Yeah, I totally agree with you. And because there can be chemistry off out the frame, but chemistry without compatibility and values can because someone can say, "Oh yeah, I'm into that too. I value that too," and then you look at their behavior week in and week out in their life, and it's like, "Fuck, well, I'm not really into that anymore. I'm not really into that whole scene." Like, but
Yeah.
so it's one thing to be interested in something; it's another thing to have it be a value that you live, and hence the compatibility piece comes. So
And
I
I
like,
think too, like I think you made a good statement. It's like there could be chemistry, but not compatibility. And I think like the chemistry a lot of times for people is like it's just the dopamine, and it's a lot of times it could be the cortisol and the adrenaline. It could be the ups and downs of the toxicity of that dynamic, which is very familiar with them and very addicting for them too. So yeah, great question.
yeah, trauma bonding
Yeah.
in the beginning. Yeah, there's a lot. That's
Yeah.
a whole podcast, right?
That's a whole separate conversation. Yeah.
That's a whole podcast, man. So, okay, here's one. Getting back to the men's coaching, the men theme. So, or really, this could be for anybody. No, I take that back. This is not just for men. This is for anybody. Giving in once in a while to our urges that we know truly no longer serve us can be okay as long as we keep it in check. Just once in a while. So,
I agree with part of that. Um, but I disagree because um, it's like, especially when it's a behavior that you have already identified doesn't serve a better version of you, and you continue to go back to that behavior,
yep.
it's a form of self betrayal. And I would disagree. And I think that that's, the battle between body and mind, the visceral experience of the craving or desire for that temptation or that urge to do something. And then a lot of times, like, it's just you wanting to take the path of least resistance for the easiest reward or greatest reward.
Right.
And so I think if you go back to those things because you aren't quite sure if it's a problem yet, I think can be an opportunity to learn and grow and experience like smashing your head against the wall again and realizing that's not the direction I want to go.
Yeah.
Um, Whereas I think if it's something you've already identified and going back and keeping it in check, I just always ask people, it's like, for what reason? And I've tried that before. I've done stuff like that to try to keep it in check, but it's like there's a sense of cognitive dissonance immediately. And if you have the dissonance, it has to go. If you have guilt or remorse about it, it has to be removed. It must.
Absolutely. I agree with you. I concur with you. I say absolutely unequivocally the answer to that one is fiction. So I'm
Yeah.
with you on that. Learning to practice delayed gratification is hell all the way through.
Yeah. I would say, that's a really good question. I would say that there are moments of like really good moments that you can have in the delayed gratification, but it can be very painful because, it's like it's like making a, beautiful plate of food and spending hours on it. You're putting together everything. You got the sauce on there, and everything's cooked perfectly. And then you walk across the living room to put it on the table, and you trip on the dog and get dog hair all over it because it spills all over the floor. It's
Right.
like there's a frustration with not giving into the things you want right away. And I think what we're experiencing is that, but the building of that tolerance of that frustration, the building of the tolerance of learning how to get pleasure out of not being pleased, I think can be really powerful. And I think that, it can build a lot of self-respect. And so I feel like there's a lot of self-respect that I've garnered in my own life from that experience of saying no to myself. And what is the fruit of self-discipline is self-respect.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I
And
think
so,
that you really grow. So I'd say it's not, maybe I would say I'm kind of in between on that.
yeah,
Um,
I designed it that way.
yeah.
But that's it, man. I mean, so doing what you say you're going to do, being proud of yourself, self respect leads to what? Self love.
Yeah.
Like, that's the shit, you know? So I think it's different for every subject. And I think it's a lifelong learning lesson. Like you can say, oh, I'm a master at like manifesting this or doing this or whatever it is. But it's like you start all over again
So true.
for everything. And so I think it's just that I've been here before and I remember how great it was when I delayed the gratification or at the beginning. This is really weird. I'm not used to this. I just want pleasure now. But it's like that whole thing of like, we can do the beneficial or we can do the pleasurable. What's
Mm.
beneficial or what's pleasurable. So yeah, I'm with you on that. Um, Kind of switching gears on this one. Fact or fiction? We have to be all or nothing in reclaiming healthy masculinity.
I totally agree with that. It has to be all or nothing. And I've seen that happen even just for example, like even with, you can tell a guy straight away, like it'll come into his finances. Like he'll go, oh, yeah, I'll pay for this program, but can I break it up in payments? And it's like, I'm telling you, all those guys that choose to break it up in payments are all the same guys that you notice usually they're not all in, right? And the
Most of the
wanting to,
time, I take your point. Yeah.
yeah, it's like, hey, I want to split this up. I want to split this up into payments because there's still the form of self-doubt that I'm not all the way in. And I think that being all in is a must. You have to be all in. You have to be fully invested, fully committed, and believe, because at that point you're really going to take a hold and you're really going to be open and you're really going to put forth the effort. I notice specifically when guys aren't all the way in, they're just they're living in the gray area. There's too much ambiguity. They have one foot in, one foot out. They have, expectations. Um, they have, it's a place in their life that just isn't going to, they need to be fully committed. It's not going to allow them to be mentally, emotionally, um, just fully
Yeah.
bought in to the change that they need to make in their life. And I think as men, when it comes to something like reclaiming your masculinity, it's like,
That's
I
fucking
mean, that's like what you want to go half in on that. It's like, no, man, that's something you got to go all in on, bro. Like, that's like, if you're going to reclaim your masculinity, bro, you better go all in on that because that's a serious deal. Right. And I think with men, especially married men and men who are even single and men who just maybe didn't have the confidence or didn't have that edge, or didn't have that alpha presence, I think, or even leadership, I think that, yeah, it's like, well, how bad do you want something? Right. To me, your level of commitment, it really is just synonymous with a level of how bad you actually want it.
yeah. And how bad do you have to let the pain get before you decide to self lead and learn to lead yourself before you can lead others, which kind of
Absolutely.
takes me into my next one. I'm 29, I'm 36, I'm 42, I'm 47. It's too late for me to create something meaningful.
Oh man, that's not true at all. That is not true at all. I have a guy right now, he's 63 in my program, and the guy says, he says, um, just a month ago, The cops are outside my house. I was getting divorced. I totally thought my marriage was over. And here I am with my wife 60 days later. I still got a month left in this program. 60 days later, and I'm in a position now where my wife and I cuddle, we hold hands. The love sessions are better than they've ever been before. And no, because what do we know about neuroscience? We know neuroplasticity. The brain is constantly always malleable. Synaptic pruning can happen all the way up until we die. And so there's always an opportunity to learn new things and unlearn old things. So, no, I'd say definitely not true.
100% agree with you on that. Absolutely. And it's a story that gets louder as people
Oh, yeah.
keep staying with it. So, okay,
Oh, yeah.
two more on this. For the fact or fiction, the personal energetics we embody are the only thing we require to attract bigger audiences and more clients as coaches. Personal energetics.
So say that question one more time.
Yeah, it's kind of a trick. I mean, it is and it isn't. The personal energetics we embody are the only thing we require to attract bigger audiences and more clients. There are coaches who will say that and have the results, but it's a debate amongst
Personal energetics, and what do we call it? What are we saying personal energetics is? Like,
you embodying your values. You embodying your values creates the frequency that you put out there. When you said
oh,
when you go up in a room and you like clients will be attracted to you just because of how. So I have many friends who are 7 and even 8-figure coaches who have said and have the results that, like, hey, the more consistent I am in my embodiment of what I value, or i.e. my energetics, the more the clients just come.
I completely agree with that. That is something that I have experienced so many times in my life, and I've heard many coaches talk about this. But I
Mm-hmm.
truly believe that when you are in complete alignment with that vision that you have, and your behavior is completely congruent with what you have for what you would want for your clients, and there's continuity across the board there.
Yeah.
I completely agree. I see clients just, you naturally attract your clients. They come to you naturally. Leads start coming in, clients start inquiring. I thoroughly believe that. That is one of the biggest things that I have learned. And I've seen a lot of coaches do as I say, listen to what I say and do what I say, not as I do, and it's like, so I've seen them flounder and fail and stay stuck and stagnate. And so I truly believe that, like, you cannot be a hypocrite, like, you really need to embody and be congruent with what you want for your people. And you are the template. You need to be the gold standard. You need to be above reproach, because from whom much is required, much is given, much is required. So you better be fucking dialed, bro.
I love it. I love it. And that being said, while still being human, and
Yes.
some coaches get caught in that too, where it's like, oh, my vibe went off a little bit, and that's why all my shit's, so.
Yes.
Um, last one. Creating trust with an audience while solving a problem we're good at for them can be easier than we often think.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that you can create trust with your audience and help them solve problems. I think when you truly understand A, what their problem is, and B, like, what the solution can be for them. And I think that it's building trust is so necessary with our audience, and a lot of people take different approaches for that. Like, some people take a document everything approach.
Right.
Some people take a more YouTube Q&A approach. Some people, and I think that's the most important thing, is you really have to formulate a sense of trust. Um, and even for clients who are inside your program, because vulnerability is the portal to healing. And I truly believe that. And I truly
Mm.
believe that no one's ever going to truly get vulnerable with someone they don't trust. Right. And so you really got to open up trust. And I think sometimes it can be a lot easier. Like, can you provide a client a shift mentally on a call, on that first call? Are you willing, or are you willing enough or able to offer that client an alternative perspective, and I think what I've learned too over the years is there's lots of times where you're working with clients, man, where you are not comfortable telling them what they need to hear, right? There's a level of discomfort for you. And it's like, that's not easy for you to do, to reflect something back to a client or to tell them something. And I think that a lot of times will build trust, because a client will say, hey, you know what? He's not about just placating me or wanting to make me comfortable. Like, he wants to help me and he's giving me this hard truth. And it's not easy for him to say either, but it's the truth he would have told himself. It's a form of his. It's like a lot of times in my content, like, I'm not talking to I'm talking to, dude, that's my self-talk. Like, I'm talking to me, dude. And that level of brutal honesty, I think, is necessary for me. So, and that's what I do really well with. Like, I think as men, I think why a lot of men get stuck in therapy is because they don't want to talk about the problem. They don't want to beat around the bush. They want actionable steps they can take into the solution today. And so
Yeah.
I think that kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. And I think,
You
yeah,
you do that so well, and I'm gonna have you plug your stuff at the end, but it's just in my mind now. Beyond dot driven on TikTok. And I mean, you do those videos on Instagram too.
yeah,
Uh, but you're so good at putting just enough. I see who you can be, because some coaches, and there's actually been a lot of talk about this too in the training community, where it's just, you gotta quit doing this, stop doing this, you're never gonna blah blah, like negative, 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 negative. But that's, you get in there and it's like, you know, how much longer do you want to feel this way? Fine, identify. But okay, what could life look like if we did this? Then you did that, and you kind of like take it up. You walk up. You're so good at those rants, and and like you said, it's you talking to you. But that is what initially pulled me in, and I'm like, yes, like I definitely resonate with this guy.
yeah, that's awesome. And I feel like that style was really cultivated in all those years of facilitating. Because let's imagine that you got a guy who's on heavy narcotics and he's like half asleep in the room, and like you walk in and there's 10 other guys like that. It's like, how are you going to captivate that audience?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like, how you're not dealing with guys who are like, hey, you're dealing with this. And so how are you going to captivate a lethargic, right, totally disoriented audience? It's like, well, you better come with some passion, man. You better
Yeah.
come, and I just for me, my passion comes from God. Like, I'll start going, dude, and I don't even know what happens. Like, all of a sudden Holy Spirit comes over me and I'm just like, I'm in the moment
For you.
and
Yeah.
I'm there and I'm like, I'm tapped in. And I also believe that having that passion comes from being in alignment, like we were saying, with, that's why I love the name of your podcast, because it is in alignment with that version of you. Because, and a lot of people toss around that term, it's like alignment. It's like, but what is that? It's like, well, alignment is truly like, okay, who I know I need to be, and my conscience and my values and my mission and my vision, and are my mission, vision, values, and my conscience all in alignment with my actions every day? Is there any guilt? Is there any shame? Is there any confusion? Is there any dissonance? Is there any ambiguity in my life? Right? Am I living a life of integrity, morals? Is my word in alignment with who I say I am? It's like all those things. When you align all those things and you're looking through the scope and it's like it all lines up, dude, life gets really freaking easy.
And this is why, absolutely, I believe that's why your delivery, and that's what drew me. That's a better way for me to articulate that. Is that why did I resonate with this guy Beyond Driven, this guy Tim, so much enough to like say, hey, let's hop on the podcast. and you wouldn't be able, I'm convinced anyway, you wouldn't be able to deliver the way you deliver so seamlessly without any ums or ahs, eyes open the whole time, focused on the camera. Like you said, it just comes through you, which would not be possible if you weren't living it. And you just answered question 5 of the aligned 5 final questions for all guests. You just answered 5, which is totally fine. So, what life experience has had the single biggest impact on how you live your life now? If you had to pick one.
I would say, life experience for sure of living a life of IV drug addiction. Um, that near death experiences, it's shaped and molded. I would say the life experience of working in the clinical setting, and I mean, like it's like a movie, man. The things that I saw and the people I worked with, and the people that died and the people that didn't make it, and speaking at funerals, and just all the stuff I've seen clients on life support, and like just all that shaped and molded. It built a just a hunger, man, and like just a relentless, just burning desire and burning passion to just like, put on the full armor of God and like, dude, I'm gonna get in this battle, dude, and give me the spot in I will spearhead this thing. Like I'm on a mission to
I love
save
it.
lives. And so I think that experience did. And I think that becoming an entrepreneur, and I think that branching out, I think that in developing my own coaching business years after that, I think really did too, because I mean, I've experienced just as many. I mean, entrepreneurship is just, there's a lot of struggles, man. So I think that experience has really, there was another layer of limiting beliefs, and there was another layer of right difficulty and pain. And, um,
Yeah.
so for anybody listening that like maybe you're trying to, break out and you're trying to become a coach, or you're trying to like, man, why is this not working? I just want to tell you, like, don't be afraid to shift things. Don't be afraid to change things. Like, don't be afraid to continue trying, and just don't give up. Don't give up. Like if God put it in you, it can't be wrong, man. And if you have the passion and desire to help others, and you're able to produce results by doing that, please don't give up. Keep it up. Keep believing in yourself. There's clients out there that you've helped. There's people out there that you've impacted. And think about that. Even just one human life, that's a person's life, and that's part of your legacy, and that's a ripple effect. So don't be afraid to continue to pivot. Don't be afraid. I know it can be hard at times. You're feeling like, man, I want to go backwards, or you're entertaining a plan B, but just don't. Just keep going, moving forward, and um,
Yeah.
things will change. You'll make adjustments, and you know,
I love that. I appreciate you sharing that piece of encouragement with everybody.
yeah, it's so important. So important.
At the risk of sounding redundant, what's the hardest pattern you've ever had to break? And you can shortcut this one if you want.
I think the hardest pattern I ever had to break was substance abuse.
Yeah.
Um, just addictions of all kind, and just being stuck in the addictive patterns.
Reinventing
Um,
addictions.
yes, and even you exchange one addiction, and you find out that addiction ends up, you have this cross addiction, and all of a sudden you have these other addictions now that you're sober, but you may be still addicted to other things. And so I
Yep.
think that for me, it's learning. You know, um, I could do it with fitness. I can do it with, supplements. I can do it with, it's just one of those things, like, to really, you know, and being okay with that, being okay with the fact that sometimes that's just going to be a part of it. And hey, I'd rather be addicted to, health and fitness than be addicted to narcotics. So, you know,
Healthy attachment.
yes.
What's one thing you do consistently to push your comfort zone, to expand your comfort zone?
I try to do things that are physically challenging. Those are the things I find are most. That's the way that I can, a guaranteed way for sure to do it.
Yep.
And if it's physical, whether it's running, whether it's like intense amount of ab work, whether it's pull ups, whether it's GVT, or progressive overload. I think anything I can do to challenge myself. Um, and I also find that talking about new topics I feel like, whether it's a content idea or if it's a lot of times, like, there's a lot of things that you need to do in the beginning when you have a business, and as you start to scale, there's a lot of stuff that you have inside your business that you're doing mostly everything. And so you never finish the work. It's always more to be done, especially when you have an online business. So I just think that, like, always looking for a way to stay in that cycle of doing more, working, right? I think the work you do in the gym, like, prepares you for that, right? Because, like, it never
That's
ends.
the easiest entrance way in, and a lot of men too. But I'm just laughing because it's like the questions, what's one thing you do to consistently expand your comfort zone? Simply put, dude, I'm a business owner.
Yes.
What do
Yes. Yeah.
welcome to entrepreneurship.
Yes.
What
Yes.
what advice would this, and this will be our last question, because the final question was going to be, what does personal alignment mean to you? And you did such an eloquent job of unpacking that. You can feel free to throw it on the end if you want, but what advice would your 8-year-old and 88-year-old self tell you now, today?
My 8-year-old self, um, what advice would he give me, or what advice would I give him?
Oh no, he's the only one giving the advice. The 8-year-old and the 88-year-old self are the one who, yeah, they're giving the advice.
The 8-year-old self would definitely say to believe, believe in what the gifts that you have, and know that although you may feel like you're cut from a different cloth and that you don't fit in and that you don't belong, that God has a place for you, and that he has a calling on your life, and that everybody has that calling, and to believe in that and to never give up, and to don't be afraid to pioneer a path that maybe you see other people aren't taking,
Amen.
right? And my 88-year-old self would definitely say, be present, slow down, enjoy the beautiful moments with your children and wife. Take it in, affirm yourself, right? Because a lot of times as entrepreneurs, it's like, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? And it's like moments of to self reflect. Like, you hit these milestones, you hit these goals, you do this work. Like, make sure that you're affirming yourself. Make sure you're telling yourself, like, how proud you are of yourself, and giving yourself that pat on the back, and really taking the time to do that for yourself. And I think that's what my 88-year-old self would say, would be, you know, um, slow down
Yeah.
and be in the moment.
I love that, and I love that, the self recognition, giving yourself the little wins. I mean, that's something I had heard it intellectually, but wasn't able to do it, and only in the last few years, really, being able to actually feel the feeling of like, oh, like making it a game, almost like something so little that you normally wouldn't. Like, dude, good job, you fucking did that, nice. And I have to like, I have to like repeat it to make it like almost ridiculous because if you don't celebrate the little wins, you're not going to celebrate the big ones.
That's true.
You won't, you know what I mean?
That's very true.
Dude, I can tell that I have a hunch that we will not only do part two, but may collaborate and connect uh, for something else, because I definitely resonate with everything you're sharing. I
I'd love
really
to.
appreciate you again, man. I appreciate you sharing your story and your experience so openly and so transparently. So do this. We are at the top of the hour. Share with them. It's time to plug. Just plug your shit away everywhere that they can find you, where you want people to go. Go for it.
Yes, you can find us on Instagram at beyond__driven. You can find us on Facebook at Beyond Driven. And you can find us online, beyond-driven.com. And you can find me on TikTok at beyond.driven. So, yeah, that's where you can find us. Um, yeah, come and check it out. And if you need any help, please feel free to reach out. I'm always available to talk to anybody that is interested in improving their life and stepping into a better version of themselves.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much, Tim. And we're going to put all those links and handles are going to be in the show notes. They're going to be in the episode bio on YouTube. So this will, again, everybody, this will be up on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever podcasts are consumed. We wish you guys all the best. Tim, thank you so much for an absolutely epic show. And I hope you have a great Halloween, my friend.
Man, thank you, brother. It was awesome. Enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Talk to you soon.